Okay, rulers, settle down. Ruler School is brought to you by Odyssey Games, where you can go to get pre-orders of all the upcoming Force of Will sets, as well as releases of previous sets after they come out. TCGPrime.com with over 100,000 Force of Will singles, as well as out-of-print boxes from the past, and TCG accessories, as well as FoulLibrary.com, a wonderful resource for deck lists, article discussions, and more. Check them out at FoulLibrary.com, as well as these amazing patrons. Special thanks to guest lecturer patrons Shukong Fu, Vite Ramen, and Maxime Van He. Thank you for your support. Class is in session. Hey the rulers, DMO73 here. We are bringing you a feature match between the Dreiwing Grusbalesta list. This is the list made by Alejandro that won his event, and an Antibody Loki. Just a reminder that Hero Cluster pre-orders are still currently available at Odyssey Games. You can check that out in the description below. And be sure to get your information in for Force of Will Festival later this year, November 5th and 6th at the Radisson Hotel in Kalamazoo, Michigan. You can check out the information there in the description below as well. We have a bunch of amazing things, wonderful participation promos, including textless dual stones and top 8 Ubers, acrylic and metal prize cards, custom playmats, judge promos, and Ubers to give away, as well as the $1 grand of cash, plus a bunch of other surprises, so be sure to come check that out. So, yes, the Grusbalesta Moonstart list is a pretty hard control list that's trying to make use of Origin Dreiwing to be able to ramp stones early, to then just kind of cancel everything and play the control game that way with a nice flying beat stick. And Josh is playing an Antibody Loki, just one of the different ways that we are currently trying to use harvesting season in the rune decks to kind of do some pretty silly things with some of the graveyard stuff that's come out in the past few sets. So we'll go ahead and see how this goes. Obviously the Antibody Loki is more of an aggressive deck, and Dreiwing Grusbalesta is kind of a control, so it'll be a matter of can Antibody Loki get under Dreiwing Grusbalesta, or will Dreiwing Grusbalesta be able to keep things controlled? Keep in mind that antibodies do not say they are not a villain, so you can just play them in any number of copies. The only thing that changes is if they're revealed from the sideboard and you aren't Typhon, they don't do anything. We see that there is that Origins in the opening hand, looking for a Dreiwing, also seeing the Welser. One of the disadvantages of Dreiwing Grusbalesta is the fact that our coin is blue-black. We do get an extra card for turn, but it does mean that we don't have access to a turn 1, like a coined out Welser, which could end up being pretty bad for us here, especially since he's going to have a pretty safe turn 1 harvesting season if that's what he decides to go for. See that Moonshade? Yep, does hit that 2. Pay that 2. And right out the gate, we're going to see that harvesting season. This is going to mill those top 10 cards to the graveyard, hoping to see as many antibodies as possible, but also just some really good cards in this that just care about the number of cards in graveyard. So you see there's already 2 there, and we hit a Fenrir, so that gets to come to hand. There's 3 antibodies. I think 3 of his Black Witches in that mill is a little bit unfortunate, and there's 4 antibodies. So this means the first antibody that comes down is a 12/12 because it will see 5 antibodies, and its natural state of 2/2 plus 1,000 is a 12/12. So it's very, very large. He doesn't have anything else that he can do there at that point because that is his only will, and he doesn't have a way to play Typhon's Blood. Our first stone call as Grusbalesta can be whatever stone we want, so we are going to grab that Moonshade. This means that all of our future stones will be whatever we want. And thankfully, we don't even have to worry about paying the will here because we are doing the Origin combination. So Origin lets us reveal a Dreiwing from the sideboard. This produces us a green and lets us recover the Dreiwing, or the Moonshade, and then we can use that green plus the Moonshade. Normally we would to try to play Guardian Dragon of the Kingdom. We're going to use the coin instead because we want to be able to have access to the Moonshade, to be able to use a cancel, the Welser or the Lorites as needed. Because again, coin doesn't help us there. So Guardian Dragon of the Kingdom comes down here, nice little 7/7 flyer that got us into a, turned our coin essentially into a permanent stone, while also leaving a stone up for interaction during Josh's turn. This is nice because his first antibody would be able to kill, his first antibody would be able to swing in, but we have the interaction to be able to probably cancel the second antibody, which feels really nice. You do see I have a second Guardian Dragon in hand there to be able to get another stone. We'll go to 4 stones next turn, which starts to feel really, really good as the control deck. Josh kind of deciding his line here. He's got a couple of options. Also does look like he has a Spirit of Decay in hand, which is another one of those wonderful cards that we talked about, caring about just the number of cards in graveyard. So right off the bat, it can, you know, be a 1-drop that steals 9 life from your opponent, which is pretty good. We're going to see a Mystery of Hidden History Mikage, though. This lets him tap, look at the top card of his deck, and choose to mill it to the graveyard, which is helpful for him to try to get those antibodies. He wants them in grave, but also, like, he wants to see some in hand, but also mostly get them to the grave so that he has good resources to be able to interact and not just be flooded with antibodies. So this is actually a pretty neat tech to be able to play into the deck. Another 2 life here, kind of doing some of our work for us, and we see that Spirit of Decay. That is most likely going to be canceled here with the Welser. We do not want to risk the ability for that to not only steal our life, but also be able to kill our Guardian Dragons before they're too big. So we're going to go ahead and put that back in hand, making use of Moonstart's effect before Last Lecture resolves to kind of see if we want to dig into a different card. Ultimately choosing to keep the card that we are digging, and it looks like we milled a March of the Dead. So then Welser gets RFG'd, we get our 2 counters, so we have that extra card in hand, and we are safe to go into our turn. Once again, doing a little bit of filtering here. I think we saw his second Origins there, and we're like, get that out of our hand. We don't need that at all. Grusbalesta calling us another stone here. Using the will from that to go ahead and do Origins. This is going to get us another Dreiwing reveal. In place is going to get us another Recovery. In place we're going to see another Guardian Dragon of the Kingdom. This is the whole idea, is like you can use Origins and Dreiwing to make 1-card dragons, or like 1-stone dragons, which leaves you a lot of will for being able to interact. Going in here for 3 plus 8 is 11 to take Josh down to 23. Still having 2 will open to be able to interact, and not super concerned about any kind of aggression here. Antibodies at this point would, you know, antibodies would trade in, but essentially he's paying 1 will to kill my 1, you know, I've also been playing 1-drops essentially, so we're not too concerned about the antibody kind of rush down that might have to happen, because he's not going to have very many resources beyond the antibodies to try to kill us. Currently, the biggest threat to my life at this point is those Spirit of Decays. So we got to keep that in control, especially if we... I do not believe the main deck is playing Horn of the Sacred Beast, so that graveyard is just going to exist kind of forever. Post recovery, looks like we're going to see another peak to mill with the Hidden History Mikage. Seeing a perfect Loki there. I imagine that's... Oh, he is going to mill that. Oh, my thought would be next turn would be a good turn to be able to flip the perfect Loki, especially since we know he has Fenrir in hand. Would still leave him will to be able to like play an antibody from graveyard. That's the other crazy thing about this list too, is if you do happen to flip the perfect Loki, you can kind of just cast a Spirit of Decay every turn or an antibody every turn from the graveyard and really just kind of wipe your opponent out that way pretty easily. Josh finding his own Origin of the 7 lands here. Because I already have Dreiwing, it's not going to produce him any will, but he's probably going to reveal his own Dreiwing just to shut off mine, so I can't make any 1-cost dragons anymore. Ultimately, we've already gotten 2 out of it, so it's not a huge deal, but it is, you know... it does kind of make Origins into a dead card in my hand at this point. But the nice thing is we can just immediately ship it away with Moonstart now that he's got it live. Just say, okay, cool, you've done the work, Origins done its job, let's get it out of here, and move on. Josh doing some of my work for me here, calls that Spirit of Decay. Don't have a cancel in hand to be able to mess with it this time, so it's going to have to resolve. Counting the number of cards in grave, I believe, is 10 or 11, so going to go down to 27 from 38. and also getting 11 +1/+1 counters on it. So this is the crazy thing about Spirit of Decay. Not only is it life, but it's also spot removal. One counter is -2/-2, which is a lot. It can set up for essentially, because my guys are both currently 11/11s, it's a little bit weird. Like, technically he has -22, -22, but because the last 200 is split between two, he can't possibly kill both my dragons. He is going to go ahead and use 6 of the counters to kill one of my dragons, then leaving himself with a 6/6. It does also provide him some nice protection for next turn, in the fact that he does not have to worry about taking, I mean, he'll take 3 damage at that point when I call the next stone. He does go ahead and say, let's go try to put those neg counters on it, and then he goes to target, he pays another 200 here, and we're going to see him try to use Power of Immortality in response to, and then this is the whole idea here, is you Power of Immortality it, you use it to kill itself, then it immediately comes back in and drains again. We do have the Fairer spell to protect on that one, so he does have the Power of Immortality live, or he does have that, you know, stat neg on it. It's down to just 1 counter, but he's not going to be able to reanimate it. Paying another 2, down to 17. There comes our first antibody of the game. It is very, very large. It's certainly going to be able to kill the Guardian Dragon, and that's where it has to swing, because it cannot swing faces if I control a creature. We're going to go ahead and filter with Moonstart to see maybe we can draw into something like a Garion, because if we did draw into something like Garion, we'd probably close the game here. Ultimately, we should have done that before he cast it, because you see that is a Wellser that we just drew into, which would have felt wonderful to just put the antibody back in hand. Our Guardian Dragon would have been safe. It wouldn't have had any kind of stat negs to worry about during his turn, and we would have been able to really go in for pressure. Ultimately, though, we are just going to go ahead and let the antibody kill the dragon, and we see a Prisia's Big Show come down here, combines itself really well, and potentially opening us up to a spot of being able to cheat in something really, really important, especially since we know there's 3 black, which is gone, and the 4th might be buried, or even if it's in his hand, it's currently tapped out. We do see a March of the Dead come back. It got milled before. We found another one, March of the Dead, to be able to reanimate Guardian Dragon. Again, 1-card dragons, pretty good. So now we're at 6 stones, which means Guardian Dragon being a 15/15. Which is excellent. Now, we could have awakened that by paying 3 to be able to set up to both Guardian Dragons, but and getting 2 more stones. Ultimately, though, that doesn't super help us, because at this point in time, his antibodies are pretty much just able to kill the Guardian Dragons. So having more will interaction is better for us anyway, to be able to close out the game on the next turn, especially since we'll be sitting on a Prisia that is up to this point, a Prisia potentially able to go get a 3-drop, which is pretty good. Keeping in mind, again, that the change to Prisia's Big Show is that Prisia cannot grab Prisia anymore. Prisia can no longer grab alternative resonators from in the deck, unless she specifically stated an alternative card. So you can't Prisia chain anymore, which is totally fine, and appreciate that tweak to it. Or appreciate that correction that we've been playing it wrong this whole time. This is the turn we could see the perfect Loki. Josh says, no, we're going to go ahead and call stone. Knowing that I have that much will, it might almost make sense to not go for the perfect Loki, because of the fact that he can't use, because he's under Dreiwing, just thinking about this now, because he's under Dreiwing, though, he'd have to pay off all 3 stones, because he couldn't produce will off of the Fenrir to perform judgment. So that's good thinking. So you see our first antibody here. Paying another 2. See another Loki Master Rune coming down here. This is the Return of God. Gets to look at the top 7 cards of his deck, put a Resonator with total cost X or less among them, where X is the number of stones. So most of this deck is 1-drops, but it's more just like, hey, let's get another Spirit of Decay. Hey, let's get another Antibody, and just immediately bring it back. So Antibody here, he gets to look at the top 7. So we have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So 5 antibodies in that hand, an origin of the 7 lands, and it looked like maybe a Tisiphone. So I don't really know what the Tisiphone would be there for, unless it was something different. Down comes another antibody. A lot of pressure coming down on this board. Ultimately, though, with how big they are, I think, no, my life total would certainly be killed with how much he has here. He could just swing in and lethal here. He could use one of the dragons, one of the antibodies to kill the dragon, and then the other ones could swing in. Ultimately, though, he does have to deal with the fact that he knows I have Prisya in hand, which is a little bit weird why he chooses to tap out here for another antibody. Maybe the thought is, I will have so many guys, they will be so big that even if you do Prisya into something, it'll just survive. I'll be able to just kill them and swing in for lethal anyway, which is a valid strategy here. We're going to go ahead and do 2 Prisyas Big Shows, not really caring, and then cast Prisya because he's tapped out. And in the immortal words of any kind of Prisya box deck, we have the one of Valentina to be able to situationally grab what we need. Valentina is going to go ahead and take all of his antibodies, and he's completely tapped out. The antibodies on my side of the field do count as being 10/10s. Josh is completely tapped out, and at that point in time, it just is go to my turn, swing for lethal. So thankfully, the Prisya box deck, the control deck, was able to have enough will to be able to set up the punish for the aggressive deck, but we'll see if it can do it again here in game 2. Obviously, the name of the game here is to try to have the will to stop, so try to have the cancel to stop harvesting season. That is the main enabler of this deck. We need to be able to see that. We do get to mill a bunch of cards, or do get to mulligan from 6 card hand. You see that the Moonshade is there. It's because it's my first stone for turn. So we shuffled the rest of the stone deck and then grabbed the Moonshade as kind of a shortcut. And then we just pass turn. So no Guardian Dragon on turn 1, which is a little bit unfortunate, but it ultimately isn't too bad. See a Call Stone from Josh. Magic Stone of Dark Depths. Blue-black. Oh, I think that other card before from the last game was Necronomicon Barrier, now that I see it in his hand. We're going to start with an Origins. This is unfortunate for me in the fact that he just gets to, kind of make his own will here. And he also sets, from the beginning, turns off my Dreiwing, which is unfortunate. The hand that I have doesn't seem to have a Dreiwing in it, doesn't seem to have Origins in it. It's a pretty slow opener, unfortunately, but this just makes it that if I draw into them, I'm in a bad way. So he starts to cast Return of God here, which would let him look for a 1-drop. And then quickly realizes that he played this in the wrong order. One thing to note, if you were playing in a tournament, that's technically a legal move that you have done, so you've committed to it, that spell, so he would have had to have resolved the Return of God. The reason why that's incorrect here, as opposed to just going for Harvesting Season first, is on the off chance that the mill from his Return of God only gets him a Spirit of Decay, like it doesn't get him an antibody. If he hasn't milled anything to the graveyard, the antibody's pretty mediocre, or the Spirit of Decay will just give me 0 life, right? As opposed to if he does the Harvesting Season first, now he's safe to hit a Spirit of Decay as well, because there will be 10 cards in the graveyard. So the Spirit of Decay by itself is just immediately 10 life, setting things up. So this is a pretty aggressive start for Josh. The sequencing error aside, just for the sake of the recording, we get to look at those top 7 and see if there's a Spirit of Decay or if there's an antibody. I mean, at this point in time, either one of them is a strong hit, especially since I have nothing on board to be able to protect myself. And you see he does just hit an antibody. Oh, he does. See, there's the Spirit of Decay. So if he had missed with the Spirit of Decay, or he had done the Spirit of Decay first, he would have just done minus 0 life, which would have felt really bad. And then he, I mean, at that point in time, he probably goes for an antibody over Spirit of Decay, but he doesn't He's trying to be the aggressive deck in this matchup, and so having a way to immediately stop that 10 life would be better for him. Ultimately, though, it's going to come down. We're going to lose 10 life and get him those 10 +1/+1 counters. And unfortunately, I get to help him a little bit because I'm going to use Pristia's Big Show here to try to see about what are we going to try to draw into to make this hand that feels pretty awkward after mulliganing 4 feel even worse. Do have a green source, which is nice. We can cast Pristia for a 1-drop. Not many 1-drops in this deck outside of, say, like a Lorite would be helpful in this situation. Unless he tries to do some kind of search play, but that seems unlikely. We are most likely going to see a couple of antibodies come down and slamming for a lot of damage. We use that Moonshade with Origins to go ahead and float some Black Will by revealing from the sideboard an antibody. So this produces a Black Will for an antibody in his hand, so he doesn't skip a stone there. And also just adds another +2 to any of his antibodies, which is a little crazy. He gets to swing in for 11 here with the Dreiwing Grusbalesta, with the Spirit of Decay. Taking me down to 17, just outside by itself. He does have the floating black available, keep that in mind. You see an antibody come down. That's enough for lethal, I think, at this point, just by itself. We do have a Welser to try to put it back in his hand and look and see if we can get to another card. Got to finish resolving the mill, or the peak from Mooj Dart. Goes back to his hand. And then we say, you know what, you're probably going to cast another one. Here's hoping I found some kind of cancel or body to play so that what you do have to play gets to go right to me. Sounds like, though, Josh actually decided to pass turn rather than play into the antibody. Maybe the thought is he doesn't want to risk having things stolen from him next turn, although with Spirit of Decay sitting on board, it's a pretty safe way to be able to just kill the Valentina outright, so that's pretty safe. Ultimately, though, I'm staring down a 1-turn clock. I'm at 15 life. I know he's got an antibody in hand. Finally see our Origins. Doesn't help us, but we just want to stop his Origins. We do get to still at least recover the stone because we recovered the Dreiwing. And at that point in time, I believe we just passed the turn. Josh making the decision to draw for turn and then go for the Power of Immortality play. I think it would have been more sense to go for the Power of Immortality play during my turn, because if for some reason I didn't have a way to stop it, then the Dreiwing would have, or the Spirit of Decay would have come back in on his turn, my turn, then go to his turn, and he can just go straight into combat with it and kill me. Ultimately, though, in response to the Power of Immortality, we're just going to go ahead and use Garion's Destruction effect to kill it, so that it can't be revived. It won't be there to be able to gain the abilities of Power of Immortality. Doesn't really do much for us, though, because we only have 2 will, and we're staring down a pretty sorry state of affairs for how many. I think a single antibody will kill me. There's 5 antibodies there. 6, it'd be a 14. So he needs to successfully resolve 2 antibodies here to kill me, because the first one would be 14, take me down to 1, and the second one would then kill me. First antibody comes down. We say that's fine. Commits to a second antibody. Also say that's fine. And then as he moves into combat, we're going to go ahead and try to cast Prisia. The idea here would being that Prisia, if it resolves, could get us a Guardian Dragon and soak up the first two. Ultimately, unfortunately, though, he does have a Black Witch, so that's going to stop our Prisia from being able to do anything. And then the first antibody can kill the Prisia. The second antibody can swing in for 1600 damage and lethal. So the aggro deck in this matchup did what it did, put up on pressure early and got in underneath the control deck to take game 2. And so we'll see how that matchup plays out as we go into game 3. Can I find a cancel for the harvesting season? First turn, unfortunately, this is the same kind of problem we saw before of like, even if I do have a cancel for the harvesting season, both of them would be out of color for my energize. So we're just doing some shortcutting here, knowing full well that he's gonna just go ahead and get to resolve the harvesting season. We do see, we'd love to see all of the Spirit of Decays hit graveyard here. We do see the one hit, and 5 antibodies hit the graveyard, which feels absolutely awful. Post Callstone, we are going to go ahead and try to dig a little bit deeper with Moonstart. This hand just does not feel super great. We need to get to a position of being able to do something, and so we're going to have to unfortunately hurt ourselves to play Guardian Dragon of the Kingdom to get another stone and just say, you know what, we're going to take a turn. Hopefully he doesn't have Spirit of Decay and just has antibodies, knowing full well that that's very unlikely. There is a turn here with being so safe that you just play Spirit of Decay and then just immediately go into steal half my life, which would be absolutely devastating. He could use Spirit of Decay, kill my Guardian Dragon, drain my life, Power of Immortality, play Guardian Dragon, drain my life, have a spot removal to go into my turn, which would just be back-breakingly devastating. There's also a world where he just, plays an antibody here. It is -9, so he can kill the Guardian Dragon because currently Guardian Dragon's only 6, or currently 7, so only takes 4 of those counters, which still gives him plenty of being able to do spot removal later, leaves him with 5. And so it's a nice little 6/6, and it has an additional 1,000 in spot removal that it can make use of. And then antibodies at this point would come down and be 14 just by itself here on turn 2. Would put me in a position where I am literally on a 1-turn clock as the control deck, staring down a board, and I just do not have great spot removal options in this list, as some or go wide options, I suppose you could say, in this list, as opposed to some of the previous control builds we've seen out of 6 Sages. I will say, though, that in the past, some metas go-wide decks have been particularly effective against the control 6-stage lists because their spot removal has not been super great. That changed a little bit when they got Flashing Smile, but that was also when they still had Feasting, so they had Melfi easily. We don't have either of those now, so it's a little bit not great. March of the Dead here just get to come down, tries to get us another stone just to provide us with some kind of buffer. Ultimately, though, we're staring down some pretty hard times. We do have a good amount of cards in hand to be able to deal with the harvesting season, to be able to do something like a Flashing Smile. But that also just kind of taps us out for the turn. And as you see, there's 3 more antibodies in that hand of Josh. So if Josh plays this smartly, even with any kind of spot removal I have, he'll be able to push through and just finish things off. Gonna swing in first with the Guardian Dragon, or with the Guardian Dragon. Gonna go ahead and see what we might be able to draw into here off the Grusbalesta or the Moonstart filter. Unfortunately, not seeing the card that we need, So we'll go ahead and go into a block. So currently Guardian Dragon is an 11/11, so it would take all 5 of the counters to be able to kill it. All 5 of the counters plus a trade to be able to kill it. So we're in a moment of like, maybe we can try to bait something out here with the block. We do decide to go ahead and do the block. But Josh, being at advantage here, can kind of force our hand by doing the Power of Immortality. Power of Immortality comes down. Unfortunately, we don't have another Garion in this hand, so we don't really have any kind of way to be able to interact. I don't see a Welser in there. We also can't afford... the problem is we can't even afford to, like, we're paying 200 to be able to cast this Flashing Smile. So it's certainly going to kill both of these guys before the Power of Immortality comes down. The problem is then, as you saw that hand from Josh, he has 2 more antibodies in it. Literally 1 more of them has to resolve, and then I lose. So the aggro deck does what the aggro deck does. The original version of this Grusbalesta list just did not have any kind of spot removal. Flashing Smile became the credit we brought in to be able to answer things like Mechanized Fenrir. But Rune decks don't use Mechanized Fenrir because you can't order it. And so we see this nice little board clear. I've got Guardian Dragon of Vizjerei. He gets to survive because this is before damage. But ultimately, with those 2 antibodies left in hand, he'll be able to play 1, kill the Guardian Dragon, play another, kill me. And so that will be the closing of that game. Cool to see Rune decks coming back using Harvesting Season. This is just kind of the first of 3 different ways we're going to be looking at Harvesting Season Rune decks in the coming weeks with different rulers and different strategies. So be sure to check those out. And we'll wonder if Harvesting Season might see some implications to the Wanderer ban list. But that is it for us for today. Slams down those 2 and we offer the handshake. We'll have the deck profiles up for both lists later this week. Thank you guys so much for watching. And until next time, this is DMO73 saying class dismissed.